This is the lesson video for chapter 6, part 2. In this section, we're going to cover creating groups of data, the group by clause, and grouping by multiple columns. Let's go to SQL Developer. And first, we're going to get the count of department IDs. So I think there's one person with department ID of null, so we should get 106. Total records of employees is 107. Now we're going to get the clause group by department ID. So we're going to get the count by department IDs. So those are the different counts by department. It doesn't make a lot of sense now, but if we add the department ID column like it shows in our next slide, that should make a little bit more sense. So now we have department ID 100, there's 6 counts. On department 30 there's 6. Also on null there's 0 because we don't count nulls. Department 90 there's 3, and so on and so on. Alright, so this makes a little bit more sense. It will make a lot more sense if we sort it. So if we sort it by department ID, it's a little bit clearer. So we go from the smallest to the highest department ID at the end with null, and we get the number of count for departments. Right. So that's creating groups of data. So we have the group by clause. So we get the max of salary and the count of records, and we group it by department ID. So we run it. So for max salary, there's of 4,400. There's 1 for max salary of 13,000. There's 2, and this is by department ID. And let me see if the next slide has. No, it doesn't, but it would make a lot more sense if we had included department ID in the select clause. So we did that. So department 10, the max salary for department 10 would have been 4,400, and there was 1. For department 20, the max was 13,000, and there's 2 people with that amount. Again, imagine if this employees table was hundreds of thousands of rows of records, and SQL statements like this would be very helpful. Let me just bring it back to how it was. So now we have grouping by multiple columns. So the first part of this SQL statement, we get the sum, department ID, and the sum of commission percent from the employees table, and we exclude the null commission percent, and then we group it by department ID. So department ID, people that don't have department IDs have a sum of 0.15, and department 80 has 7.65 commission percent. Now the second part of this SQL statement, we add group by department ID and job ID. So we have those columns in the select clause. Right. So we're grouping by 2 different columns, department ID and job ID. So let's run this, and we get department 80, job ID is 6.15 the commission percent, the sum of commission percent, and department ID 80, job ID SA underscore man, and it's 1.5, and department null with this job ID is 0.15. Right, so we group by department ID and job ID. And that's grouping by multiple columns. Okay. Now in this next section, we go to restricting group results and having the having clause. Okay, so here we're getting department ID from job history, and we only want department IDs that are 50, 60, 80, and 110, and we're using the in. We're using in to exclude the rest. Alright, so those are department IDs that we selected, and this is from job history. Okay, the second part of the SQL statement, we add count by department ID, but first we exclude we only want to include those department IDs. So here we run this SQL statement, and for department ID we have 2, for department 50 we have 2, 80 we have 2, and for 60 we have 1. Right, so we only selected these departments, so that's what we got. And we're using the count function to add the number of people in job history that have those department IDs. Now we can further restrict results by the having clause. And the having clause, it's after the data has been filtered with the where clause, then we add, see here in the previous example we only had 110, 50, 80, and 60. We're going to restrict it even further by saying we're going to add the having clause, and we're going to restrict it by having departments that where department ID is greater than 50. So we should get this one, 80, 60, and 110, and then where count is greater than 1. So that means we're going to get 80 and 100 because count for 60 it's greater than 50, but count is 1, so we're looking for greater than 1. So we run it, and we only get 110 and 80, which 110 and 80 it's greater than 50, and count is greater than 1. Alright, so we add the having clause, and this is to filter results after they have been grouped. And this is the end of the lesson video for chapter 6, part 2.